I'm here with a good friend in Christ, Mike Glasscock, and he and his wife Tammy are missionaries to Guatemala. So he's made himself available to come and share with us what's happening in his ministry. Mike, it was about a year ago that you and I met. It was in a men's breakfast meeting.
Yeah, I remember it well.
Actually, we had met before that in
Emmaus
community, right. But that morning I listened to your story about how you and your wife had made a decision to take a plunge.
Take a plunge,
yes.
Yeah. It's amazing because so many people would approach us in that time frame talking about how big a jump it was, how big a change in our lives it was. And I kept trying to get people to just pause for a minute and understand that it was just a small step of obedience. Mm-hmm. That God had been working in us and through us for 7 or 8 years, from the time of our first trip to Guatemala to making that point of confirming in us that this was our next step.
Wow.
And so, yeah, from appearances and all the things that went on that only God could do, it looked like a big jump. But in my spirit, it was it was another step of obedience.
Wow, it was just a continuance.
Just a continuance, yeah.
Wow.
God said, simplify. He said, be still and know. He said, this is what I want you to do next. And then the ultimate was our last trip down there. He'd called us to more for 7 years, and we didn't truly understand what that meant. And then our last trip down there was this incredible, we had asked God to confirm that this was our next. And the geography of it is incredible. We had a ministry from California with a team out of Virginia meet a couple from South Georgia in Guatemala City at a Sunday morning church service. And we walked up at the end of service for prayer, because they'd opened it up to prayer, and we were wanting to ask some questions. And she had a scripture for Tammy. I don't recall what it was, but it was almost identical to one we got from a friend in the States. Mm. And then a guy comes up from across the way, one of the other members of the team, and he says, which one of you is the writer? And I just hung my head because, okay, God, I get it. This is our next. Wow. This is where we'll be.
Wow. How he speaks to us is amazing, isn't it? But you were alert to those words and how it meant. So you heard God's voice through him.
Absolutely, absolutely. As you would say, it was a miracle.
Yeah.
To align the geographies up for that's not happenstance.
That's right.
It just...
Yeah. That's wondrous, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was absolutely great. Now, I'll tell you the funny side of the story. When we first walked in, they were playing the song Good, Good Father. Mm-hmm. And my wife would dearly love for God to just give her the gift of Spanish. And God has told her time and time again, no, you're going to have to work for it. Well, on this particular day, we walk in, because we're rushing in to get there on time. And she says, I can understand it. And I had to pause and look at her and say, baby, they're singing the chorus in English.
Oh, yeah. That is...
No, it's not saying Bien Bien Padre, it's saying Good Good Father. It's okay.
So it was one of the Pentecostal moments. She heard her language in her own.
Absolutely. And I know she doesn't mind me telling that story.
That is
We've
cute.
shared it more than once.
Sure. God's a God has a sense of humor.
Oh, he absolutely does.
So I'm sure he was chuckling too.
Say, watch this.
Well, friends, as we begin this conversation, we are about seeing the wondrous hand of God working in our lives. We're given this grace and this ability through the Holy Spirit. And it's a miracle. Life in Jesus Christ is a living miracle.
Absolutely.
And we are called to live a life that is miraculous in the realm of Christ. Isaiah talks about the kingdom using the highway of holiness, that metaphor. We're walking on a highway of holiness when we come to Jesus, and we're blessed beyond measure along the way. So that's what we're sharing, and how our minds and spirits break into that light as we go along more and more for all of us, right?
It's crazy.
No matter how long we've walked the journey, grace is always amazing. No matter how long we've walked the journey, His light becomes more intense. And no matter how long we've walked the journey, it becomes more and more wondrous. And all those aha moments continue. So,
It says His grace and mercy is renewed every day.
yes,
Why do we expect that to change?
that's right. That's right.
We just get kind of tired, I think. We start to lose our focus.
Mm.
And I've called them details. Life is about details, those little moments when things just fall into place, and it's of no effort on my part. This was just the next step that had to happen, and I listened to God, and I'm in the right spot. And it's been fun to watch.
Yes, yes.
It's fun to watch, and it's not so much watching as in a passive thing because you're actively involved in ministry. But then these things occur, and they occur with such regularity that they refresh and renew you and keep you moving forward.
Yes, amen.
And that's amazing to me.
So how, as you talk about this, how do you stay focused? What are some of the ways you use to stay focused amidst all the things you do, which we're going to talk about in a minute?
For me, the morning devotional has become just adamant. For me, I do a YouVersion in the morning, YouVersion verse of the day. Frequently I'll go in and read it in context. I'll go find the rest of that chapter and go, okay, where were we in this, and where is this particular scripture at? And then Oswald Chambers is still, I've read him for 4 years in a row on a daily basis, and it still gives me new insights. And then just being open to what's around us. I've gone in and found a book in a bargain bin that, okay, the title grabbed me, and I went, and I spent 6 months reading it. Not just reading it, but devouring it, word for word, and just little bits and pieces along, and that and writing my experience and processing through writing it, some of which ends up on Facebook, but not all of it.
So you journal?
I journal.
Okay.
So it's devotional, it's reading others' commentaries, it's journaling, and it's just sharing life with other people. And when you've got people from a completely different culture, that sharing can be kind of interesting to watch as it unfolds. We've got an administrator who's in his late 20s, just had a birthday, and very much it's interesting the conversations we've had along and along. So he encourages me, and I in turn try to encourage him.
Yes, amen.
And then there are moments when we're in one of the sites or whatever, and something happens, and you just kind of sit back and wonder and go, wow.
Reflection is an important part of our faith journey, our encouragement and our refreshment, because as we look back, we see the hand of God. I think of the Bible passage where Moses says to God, I want to see your glory. And he goes out and stands on the mountain edge. And God says, fine, you can see my glory. And as he goes along, God puts his hand over the eyes of Moses, and he can't see the face of God. But as God passes, he removes his hand, and Moses sees the back side of God. So that reflection, looking and seeing where God has moved, is part of the reality of our relationship with Christ.
It's amazing to watch.
And that's intriguing you mentioned journaling, because that's where you can really flesh out what you've seen in journaling. And journaling has so many aspects. We can journal with prayers that we're praying for and keep track of the progression of God's movement in there. And we can journal in conversation to God. We can journal in reflection of where we've seen Him and how He's spoken. Sometimes I'll journal a conversation that I've had with somebody. Maybe like you, unbeknownst to them, they've said something that has clicked, that God is speaking. See, our friends, what we're talking about is that we live in the now of Jesus. Heaven is a place of the fullness of glory, the ultimate perfection of Jesus. But now we can see him, though dimly, but we can see him and we can experience him. It's wondrous, and that's what our life is called to be. It's not just a conceptual faith. Our life is a true living faith with an engaging God, and that's the wonder and the miracle of Jesus Christ, for we so need him. Amen.
Amen.
Well, tell me about now. You've made that step. You've been in Guatemala for a year, and what's foremost in your heart about your experience there? You've had to. We were sharing before we came before the camera here. We're sharing about the learning of Spanish. That amazes me because you've done so well from my perspective, and it's not been easy, I'm sure.
No.
And
we were fortunate in that we went to school in San Pedro, which is on Lake Atitlan, and we were able to spend 8 weeks in language immersion school. So we were literally, Tammy and I both had our own instructor, and we would go at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we would be in an 8x8 room with a table between 2 chairs and a dry erase board, and that was the classroom, one-on-one. And the amazing thing was...
Can't get out of that, can you?
No, there's no, I'll let somebody else answer this one. No. And one of the funniest things I struggled with in Spanish, double negatives are not only expected, they are encouraged, and they happen regularly in the language. And for me, as involved in writing and just in life, it was so hammered into me that double negatives are not allowed. I actually had an argument with my instructor. I said, no, doble negativo es mal, es no bueno. And just on, trying to, you're not going to convince me. Understand, I'm going to struggle with this, because in this language it's okay, in the language I grew up with it's not. But it was...
Eventually you gave it.
I gave in Spanish, doble negativo es bueno. I don't quite agree with it, but okay. But it's the first year down there, spending the time in school. Now, understand that the immersion idea of language is really a great way to learn it. We would go back to school once a week in the evening, and they would have a cultural, like a meal plan or a video to watch or things of this nature. And it was quite interesting because I love to cook. And while the language barrier was still pretty sharp, they've got this open fire, she's cooking, she's roasting some tomatoes. And I instinctively know, I know what you're doing. But then having her try to explain it, no, don't worry, I got this. I knew, because we had a common language in cooking, that made it, I understand what you're doing. I don't need the words, I understand what you want. So, and it was, those kind of instances were fun. We actually played hooky one day. It's not bad for an 8-week stint. We met a team from one of our primary churches that supports HRI. We met them on the site on Santiago. And it was so funny because when I walked in and we were talking to them, this one young man walks up and he kind of looks at me and he tilts his head and you can see the light bulb go off. He says, "You're them." I've never been a them.
Yeah.
It was just that moment where he realized why we were there. And I kind of took it back, tried to take a step back into the shadows, because that's just not, that's not my way.
Sure.
But and we had opportunities to minister to the family we lived with for 8 weeks. We ministered to the laundryman and his wife a couple of doors down, which was exciting. And then just different people we would see walking to and from school every day. One particular morning, we were running late. I'll be honest, we were running a little late. And so we met this guy closer to the house as opposed to the halfway point. And he looks at me and in perfect English goes, "You're going to be late." And he kept talking. I'm like, "I didn't know you spoke English."
Surprise.
It was fun. It was fun. It was intimidating. I'm not going to lie. My language, my Spanish is still,
Yeah, I would find that
40.
intimidating.
it's
Yeah.
about 40%. Duolingo is my best friend. I'll spend half an hour a day studying through it, which has helped.
Let me ask you in that process, we talk about Jesus doesn't, and of course this is a general statement, Jesus doesn't call the gifted, he gifts the called. And can you relate to that?
Absolutely,
How
absolutely.
he imparts his gifts, and did you feel his assisting grace in the process?
Absolutely, absolutely. That was one of the most amazing things, is while there was that language barrier, there's a comprehension that goes on when we have day-to-day things that are the same. We have those things in common. The struggles for them and the struggles for us are very real. If you're open and you're listening, people are people. And through being spirit-led, you can see things and you kind of go, okay, and there's a certain amount of discernment involved. But it's just fun to watch, because while they are a completely different culture, there's so many norms that we can relate to, and they help create conversation, they help create understanding. You just have to slow down enough to listen. And that's one of the biggest thing in my faith walk has always been, be still and know. I don't have to be the one talking. Most of the time I'd rather be the one listening. And that's been the way God has shown me the most.
Right.
It's just seeing the people.
The ability to listen to God through circumstances and voices, and be that presence of God, which is better done by listening than sometimes. We have to be very careful with the words that we speak, because words have the power of life and death, of creation and destruction.
Well, my grandmother always told me, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth, live accordingly. So.
Live accordingly. That's good. It was an early teaching, huh? Now, in this, and what you've gone through, that transition initially in there, that immersion into the language and the culture, God's doing that as I picture him, you like cooking, of putting different ingredients in and increasing the batch of its texture, all for a purpose. And you're telling me that purpose about the school that I guess ultimately you'll be directing. Yeah. Share about that, because there's needs every place.
Absolutely. They're essentially, HRI, Hope Renewed International, has 5 different areas of ministry. Now, the one we are most specifically called to, or we believe at this point, is the directors of the Transition Home for Boys. Now you got to understand, in Guatemala, 10 years ago, they shut down international adoptions. Well, it's kind of like a pot on the stove. You put a lid on it when it starts to boil, but you don't turn the heat down. It's not going to slow the boiling process. In that same concept, there are still children that are in need of being adopted, and when you shut off,
no longer be
that you can't be internationally adopted
out of the country.
Out of the country. There's been move in the last year or so to change that. But what we see is young men, as they come out of 18, they're required to leave the orphanage. And some of these young men, they've been in a government-run orphanage where the meals are prepared for them, and this is done, and this is done, and this is done. So there's been no learning, no life skills learned. So here we come out at 18, and they don't really know how to live on their own. In some cases, we have young men who've gotten into small-time gang trouble and realize that this is not the life they want. And so they want an out, and they're serious about it. These are the young men that we will do. What we'll do is we'll take them to the lake, to Lake Atitlan, to the site there, which is 3 to 4 hours away from where most of their trouble in Guatemala City or elsewhere in the country has been. And we'll move them to a site where they will have discipleship, they will have mentoring programs, we will work on their overall health, we will work on their education, get them up to speed depending on what they are. And with the facilities around the lake and the different communities around the lake, we're hoping to develop a list of mentors so that if I have one young man who's interested in cooking, like I am, we can take him and say, okay, we'll develop a mentorship program with this specific person. So it's really trying to develop the program is pretty massive, and the site is absolutely gorgeous. I have to be careful showing pictures of the site because it's a beautiful lake.
Mm-hmm.
And people go, well, you're just on vacation. Not exactly.
Because it's about people. It's
It is.
the environment. God has blessed you with an attractive environment, but it's about the people. It's about their situation, their context, where you meet them in life, and dealing with their brokenness. For we're all broken and in a state of repair.
That's
and healing.
One of the biggest things that people understand is we can't, as Americans, go over there and say this is your measure of success. And that's something we have to be very specific about and very discerning about, is what do you measure as success? It may not be my measure, but for your culture and you specifically, this is as far as you want to go, or this is what you want to do. And for me to try and force you into what I would grow up calling success is actually detrimental to the culture and the society, and it's not what God really wants.
Right. We cannot project our success onto another person. We have to come up and walk side by side with them in life.
Absolutely.
Whether a little child or an adult or a
Absolutely.
teenager. Yeah, that's beautiful.
That's part of
So that's the goal. Now, are you there yet? Are you engaging these children, or is that a different stage?
That's kind of at a different stage. We're still in the process of construction.
Okay.
We've got what they call a palapis hut, which would be kind of what we would call a tabernacle. A ceiling and big timbers and a floor, and that's pretty much it. It's absolutely a gorgeous place to put a hammock. But then behind it, we're building the primary building, which will have residency for up to 8 young men, plus Tammy and I will be on site at that point. And once we get that done and we can start the program with the first year set of students, then we're going to work further up the hill, because the property is only 40 to 60 meters wide, but it's also about 400 to 600 meters in height. It just climbs the side of the mountain.
Okay.
So we will have additional, and what we're planning to do is domes, monolithic or echo shells, domes for different dwellings, so that you'll have room for 2 to 4 in each of these dwellings. So you'll have a first stage, a second stage, and a third stage. And a lot of this is still in the planning as we also plan the physical plan and get it built. But while we've been doing all that and getting all that planned, there are 4 other areas that Hope Renewed is involved in that have given us more than ample opportunities to work in a preschool in Zone 3, to work at the Girls' Orphanage in Mazatenango, to go on day trips, I guess you'd call it. I've been to the youth prison there in Guatemala City for a couple of times, which was incredible.
The whole mission field in itself.
Absolutely. We've got a young man who's our carpenter who would dearly love to be there on a regular basis, and it's kind of fun to watch him because he just lights up when we're headed to the prison. That's a go-to for him. And then of course the preschool is located just outside one of the largest landfills in Central America, where you've got squatter communities that have sprung up over years all the way around the rim. And so you've got parents and children. Well, okay, it's illegal for the children to work in the landfill. The parents go into the landfill.
This is a garbage
landfill.
Yeah.
And it's funny, the process is, you'll see a big yellow 20-foot truck full of garbage come up, and as it enters the gate, you'll see a group of people put their hand on the truck. That means they've tagged that truck is theirs. And there is violence that breaks out if you jump the truck.
It's a territorial thing.
It's a very territorial thing, because what they're doing is they will go through the garbage looking for recyclables. They will go through the garbage looking for reparables, or things they can sell to make money to eat. Now, unfortunately, these squatter communities have grown up, and some of these kids that we're seeing in preschool now were born on in that community. That's all they've ever known.
Mhm.
So outside of that life, they don't really.
So your presence there actually works as God would have you there as a hope for them,
Absolutely.
an assisting presence of grace. And
Absolutely.
that's a miracle that's being injected into their lives, you know.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing because it's not of us,
No.
but it's of God
No.
and the wonder of His work. And as we're talking with our friends that are listening, Mike, talking about the whole process, the taking the step, the learning of the language, the enculturation of the culture, and seeing more and more where God is using you and how God is going to use you. I want to point out one thing. Miracles, first of all, grow out of the grace of Jesus Christ. Miracles are not popcorn. They don't come out of a vending machine. Sometimes they happen very sudden, but more than not, they happen in a process. And so what we see and can hear in Mike's conversation is a miracle that's happening, and it's made up of smaller movements of miracles into a larger weaving of a miracle. And so it's continuous.
Yeah.
And that's miraculous in itself, the supernatural action of God in our lives.